I used to believe that silence was a shield. That if I kept my mouth closed, if I carried the weight of betrayal on my own shoulders, I could protect the two most important people in my life, my children. To the outside world, we were the perfect family. People admired me for the stability I built, for the way I seemed to have everything under control. I was the mother who volunteered at school events, the woman who hosted dinners with a warm smile, the neighbor others trusted for advice. They saw strength, but what they didn't know was that my silence was breaking me from the inside. My husband played his role flawlessly. To everyone else, he was the model of a hardworking, man-charming, reliable, the kind of husband people believed every woman dreamed of. He held doors open, remembered birthdays, cracked jokes that made everyone laugh. And I wanted to believe that image just as much as everyone else did. I clung to it, even when the truth started whispering in places I couldn't ignore. Then there was my sister, my closest confidant, my best friend, the one I trusted with my secrets, my children, my tears. She wasn't just family, she was part of my soul. She came over for coffee. She helped me cook holiday meals. She knew the rhythms of my life as if they were her own. Having her so close made me feel safe, because family is supposed to be the one place betrayal can't touch. Or at least, that's what I told myself. Our home was full of memories. Picture frames on the walls, laughter that lingered in every corner, and a sense of belonging that I thought nothing could shake. We made plans for the future vacations we never took, retirement dreams, promises whispered in the quiet of the night. I built my world around those promises, blind to the cracks forming beneath my feet. My silence became a kind of glue, holding together a life that was already falling apart. But silence doesn't erase lies, it only buries them, and buried lies don't disappear. They rot, and the stench eventually rises. I thought I was protecting my children by swallowing my pain, by smiling when I wanted to scream, by pretending everything was fine. I believed that if I kept the family picture perfect, they would grow up untouched by the chaos I was hiding. I was wrong. Silence doesn't protect. It corrodes. The worst part? I thought my sacrifice meant something. I believed my loyalty would change him, that my patience would inspire honesty, that my silence would be rewarded with the stability I craved. But betrayal doesn't respect silence. It feeds on it. And while I stayed quiet, he grew bolder. Each secret I swallowed gave him permission to create another. Each time I chose silence for my children, I was handing him another weapon to wound me with. After years of living this way, I began to feel like a ghost in my own home. My voice didn't matter. My needs didn't matter. I was a body holding up a house of lies, hoping that my children would never feel the earthquake. New was coming. I carried my silence like a cross, convincing myself it was an act of love. But love isn't supposed to break you, and my silence was breaking me. If you've ever trusted the wrong person, if you've ever kept quiet because you thought it was the noble choice, hit like and subscribe. This story may open your eyes in ways you never expected. Because here's the truth. Silence doesn't just hide betrayal, hides the strength we don't even know we have. And sometimes, the moment we stop, being silent is the moment we finally come alive. So I want you to think about this. What if the people closest to you were the ones sharpening the knife for your back? Would you stay quiet to protect an image, or would you find your voice before it destroyed you? I used to think that the cracks in my marriage were just stress, just the natural wear and tear of two people building a life together. That's what we tell ourselves, isn't it? That little excuses can cover the things we don't want to. See, he said he had more work trips because business was demanding. He said he was tired because the company was pressuring him. He said late nights at the office were proof of how hard he was working for us. And I wanted so badly to believe him, 'cause believing meant I could keep pretending that everything was perfect. Believing meant I could silence the doubts that scratched at my mind late at night when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, waiting for him to come home. The phone became his second skin. Once he used to leave it on the counter without a care. Now it was glued to his hand. If he wasn't texting, he was scrolling. If he wasn't scrolling, he was hiding the screen when I walked into the room. Turned the brightness down, tilted it away, placed it face down on the table. And every time I asked why, he'd laugh. "You're imagining things. You're being paranoid." Do you know what that does to a woman? To be told that her instincts, the very compass she's trusted or whole, life, are suddenly wrong. It makes you doubt yourself. It makes you question your own worth. And yet, I told myself to stop overthinking. After all, hadn't he always provided? Didn't we have a beautiful home, 2 wonderful children, and a future already planned? But the excuses began to tangle together like threads in a web. He would say he had a late meeting, but then come home smelling a perfume that wasn't mine. He'd claim exhaustion, but then pick up his phone in the bathroom for half an hour while I waited outside, listening to muffled whispers he swore were just work calls. But perhaps the cruelest twist of all was my sister. She was always there, always nearby, always available. At first, I thought it was a blessing. She was family, someone I could lean on. When he was away, she filled the silence. When I was tired, she helped with the kids. She made me laugh. She made me feel less alone. I thought her presence was proof that I was loved, that I had allies. I never once imagined that her closeness was part of the very lie being spun around me. I silenced the alarms ringing in my head. I told myself loyalty meant trust, and trust meant blind faith. And maybe you've done the same, ignored the signs because facing them would shatter everything you built. Maybe you, too, have convinced yourself that love demands silence, that family excuses betrayal, that loyalty requires blindness. But the truth is, the red flags were waving in front of me all along. I just chose not to see them because seeing them meant losing the illusion of safety. I remember one night clearly. He said he had a business trip out of town. He kissed me goodbye, suitcase in hand, and told me to get some rest. Hours later, I found his car parked 2 blocks away. I stood there, staring at it, heart pounding, my chest tight, with a realization I didn't want to accept. He wasn't where he said he would be. He wasn't who he claimed to be. But instead of confronting him, I swallowed the truth. I went home, tucked my children into bed, and told myself it wasn't what it seemed. That's the power of denial. Lit can be stronger than evidence. If you've ever brushed aside that gnawing voice inside you, if you've ever ignored the truth because facing it felt too heavy, stay tuned. Because sometimes the smallest detail, the way someone hides their phone, the way their excuses don't quite fit, can unravel the biggest secret of all. So I have to ask, have you ever ignored red flags because you were too loyal to see the truth? There are moments in life when denial can no longer protect you. When the truth doesn't knock gently, but crashes through the door, shattering everything you thought was real. For me, that moment came not in whispers or suspicions, but in undeniable proof that stripped away every excuse I had ever given him. It started on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I was tidy in the living room when a piece of paper slipped out from his jacket pocket, crumpled, damp from the storm. At first, I thought it was just another receipt, something trivial. But as I unfolded it, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a receipt, it was a hotel invoice. 2 nights, a king-sized room, champagne room service for 2. And the signature at the bottom, his. The man who told me he was at a conference, who had kissed me goodbye with the same lips that toasted another woman hours later. My hands trembled as I held that paper, the ink smudged by the rain, but the betrayal as sharp as glass. Still, denial is stubborn. I told myself maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was for a client. Maybe there was an explanation. But my body knew what my heart refused to say. The man I trusted was betraying me. The next day, I followed him. Quietly, carefully, my heart hammering as if it already knew what was coming. I watched him drive not to the office, not to a meeting, but to a small cafe on the edge of town. I parked across the street, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Then she appeared, my sister. My own flesh and blood. She walked in smiling, radiant, as if she belonged to him. And when he stood to greet her, his hand brushing hers like a lover's, my world collapsed. There are no words for the kind of betrayal that slices from two directions at once. To see my husband and my sister laughing, leaning close, sharing secrets meant for MIT was a wound so deep it didn't even bleed at first. It was numbness, disbelief, the sound of my own heartbeat, echoing in my ears as the truth burned into me. I didn't storm inside, I didn't scream or throw a scene. I sat there, hidden, watching through the glass like an outsider in my own life. Every smile they shared, every glance, every touch was a dagger. And yet, I couldn't look away, because I needed to see it with my own eyes. I needed proof that the cracks I had ignored had turned into an earthquake that split my life in two. That night, when he came home, he kissed me like nothing had happened. He asked about dinner, about the kids, about my day, okay? And I smiled back, silent, my mind screaming while my lips played the role of the loyal wife. But inside, something had shifted forever. The curtain had been pulled back, and I could no longer pretend. You see, betrayal isn't just about the act, it's about the audacity. The audacity to lie to your face, to share a bed with you while giving their heart to someone else. And when that someone else is your own sister, the betrayal multiplies. Not just the loss of a husband, but the loss of family, the collapse of trust that once felt unbreakable. From that day forward, every touch felt like poison, every word like venom. I no longer believed in his excuses, no longer cared about his long nights at work, because I knew the truth. And the truth, once revealed, never hides again. If you've ever reached the moment when denial no longer shields you, when the truth stands tall no matter how much you beg it to shrink, then you know the breaking point I'm describing. It's the moment your soul whispers, no more. If this story resonates with you, remember to hit like and subscribe because the truth I uncovered next will leave you breathless. And now I ask you, if you discovered the two people you trusted most were betraying you together, what would you do? Would you confront them head on? Or would you stay silent, waiting for the right moment to strike back? There comes a point when silence is no longer survival but suffocation. After nights of lying awake with that image burned into my mind, my husband and my sister together, laughing as if I never existed, I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. The weight of the secret was crushing me, and the only way forward was through the storm itself. The confrontation didn't happen in some carefully planned moment. It erupted like lightning, sudden and blinding. He had come home late again, his tie loosened, the faint scent of perfume clinging to him that was not mine. I watched him move through the house as if everything were normal, dropping his briefcase by the door, asking about dinner, pretending to be the man he once played so well. But I couldn't hold it anymore. The truth rose up in my chest like fire, and before I could stop myself, the words flew out. How long have you been sleeping with her? He froze. Not the kind of freeze that comes with confusion, but the kind that comes with recognition. His back stiffened, his hand still on the strap of his bag, and then, slowly he turned to me. For a split second, I saw fear. But it was quickly replaced with something colder: calculation. He tried to laugh, tried to wave it off. You're imagining things. You've been stressed. Don't let your mind play tricks. But I wasn't the woman he thought I was anymore. I laid the receipt on the table between us, the ink still sharp enough to slice through his lies. His face drained of color. And for the first time, he didn't have a script ready. He stuttered, stumbled, then turned defensive. It's not what it looks like, he snapped. But the truth was standing naked in the room, and we both knew it. That's when she walked in, my sister. She had stopped by unannounced, her usual smile on her lips, the kind she always wore when she pretended to be the supportive sibling. But when her eyes landed on the paper on the table, on the way I stood with my arms crossed and my husband pale as a ghost. The mask slipped. And suddenly, the room was crowded with truths none of us could keep buried anymore. I turned to her, my voice breaking but steady enough to cut. "How long have you been betraying me with him?" The silence was deafening. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, but no words came. Because there are no words that can justify stabbing your own blood in the back. The three of us stood there, locked in a triangle of betrayal. Him scrambling for control, her shrinking under the weight of exposure, and me, trembling but unbroken, realizing I was finally seeing their faces without the masks they had worn for years. He tried to spin it, of course. He reached for my hand, his voice softening into the manipulative tone he had used so many times before. "It's not serious. It was a mistake. You're the one I love." But I pulled my hand away. Because love doesn't hide in hotel rooms. Love doesn't smile across a cafe table at your sister. Love doesn't erase your worth while feeding on your trust. And then she spoke. My sister, the one I once trusted with every secret, every childhood memory, every tear. Her voice was small, almost childlike. "I didn't mean for this to happen. We didn't plan it. But betrayal is never accidental. Betrayal is a choice, repeated over and over until it becomes a life lived in shadows." The confrontation didn't end in screaming. It ended in silence. The kind of silence that comes when all the masks have fallen, when there is nothing left to defend, no story left to sell. It was the silence of truth, heavy and undeniable, pressing down on every corner of the room. And in that silence, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time, I realized their betrayal said more about them than it ever did about me. I wasn't the fool, the weak one, the disposable wife, or the gullible sister. I was the one who had given love honestly, who had trusted fully. They were the ones who had turned that trust into a weapon. If you've ever faced the moment when lies collapse and masks fall, you know that. Silence. You know the way it pierces deeper than any scream, the way it reveals everything without a single word spoken. And that silence is where power begins to change hands. If you've ever had to stand face to face with betrayal, hit like and subscribe, because what happens after the truth explodes is even more powerful than the confrontation itself. And I want to ask you this. If the two people you trusted most in the world revealed themselves as your greatest betrayers, would you find the strength to face them more? Would you let silence eat you alive? Children always know more than we think. We imagine we are shielding them, protecting their innocence, preserving their little worlds from the storms that rage inside our homes. But silence is not a wall, it is a mirror, and the cracks in our lives eventually reflect in their eyes. After the confrontation, I tried to return to routine. Breakfast on the table, laundry folded, dinner planned. I thought if I moved quickly enough, if I plastered enough smiles on my face, the children wouldn't notice the shadows. But children don't look at the masks we wear. They look at the space between the words, the heaviness in our steps, the way our voices tremble when we try too hard to sound normal. And my kids noticed. One evening, my son lingered at the kitchen doorway longer than usual. He didn't ask for snacks or homework help. He just stood there watching me stir a pot of soup I wasn't even hungry for. Finally, he asked, "Mom, are you sad?" The words nearly undid me. 'Cause how do you tell your child that the world you built for them is collapsing? How do you admit that the father they adore and the aunt they trust have betrayed everything you thought was sacred? I turned, forcing a smile, but he didn't believe it. Children can smell lies. "I hear you crying sometimes," he whispered, his little voice cracking like glass. And that was the moment I realized my silence was not protecting them, it was teaching them. Teaching them that pain must be hidden, that betrayal should be swallowed, that dignity should be sacrificed for appearances. That was not the legacy I wanted to leave. But breaking the silence wasn't easy. The first time they saw me confront their father, their faces told me everything I needed to know. They were old enough to piece together the puzzle. Old enough to hear the sharpness in his voice, the way his lies tangled on his tongue. Old enough to see me standing taller, refusing to bend. The night. It became undeniable was the night my daughter found the courage I hadn't given myself. She came to me, clutching her stuffed bear, her eyes wide and wet. "Mom, why do you let him hurt you?" The words stabbed me deeper than his betrayal ever had, because children should never have to carry the burden of watching their mother break. And so I told them not everything, but enough. Enough for them to understand that love is not supposed to look like lies. Enough for them to know that silence is not safety. Enough for them to see that even in betrayal, their mother was still strong. If you've ever tried to protect your children by hiding the truth, you know the unbearable weight it brings. It's like locking yourself in a cage while pretending to sing lullabies. But children deserve more than illusions. They deserve honesty, dignity, and the example of a parent who refuses to disappear. I want you to hear this. If you are holding back because you think silence is saving them, remember, children don't need a perfect story. They need a true one. If this moment resonates with you, if you've ever swallowed your pain to shield your kids, hit like and subscribe, because the next part of this story shows exactly what happens when silence finally shatters. And now I ask you, if your children saw you broken, would you hide behind silence, or would you let them see your strength rise from the ruins? Silence had been my prison for years. I thought I was protecting my children, shielding them from the cracks in our marriage, keeping the illusion of a united home alive. But silence had also been my chain, binding me to a life where I was diminished, ignored, and betrayed. When I finally broke it, something inside me shifted forever. I was no longer the woman who whispered her pain behind closed doors. I was the woman who stood tall in the light of truth. At first, it was terrifying. The moment I decided to stop hiding, I feared what others would say, how they would judge me, whether they would believe him over me. He had always been so charming in public, always the man everyone admired. I knew stepping forward meant I would face doubt, gossip, maybe even rejection. But what I didn't expect was the strength that poured in once I stopped carrying the burden alone. I began telling my story not in bitterness, but in clarity. I told friends who had long suspected something was wrong. I confided in family members who thought I was simply exhausted from motherhood. And with each truth spoken, I felt lighter. My words no longer belonged to him, twisted by lies. They belonged to me, and in speaking them, I reclaimed my voice. For the first time, I sought therapy. I sat across from a woman who didn't look at me with pity, but with recognition. She helped me unravel the knots of self-doubt he had tied around me, teaching me that endurance wasn't the same as strength, that survival wasn't the same as living. Week after week, I learned to see myself, not as broken, but as battle-tested. And with every session, I became bolder. The community that once admired him began to notice the cracks too. His mask slipped more and more, his arrogance growing, his dismissiveness no longer hidden. People started to ask questions. Some offered whispers of support, others gave me quiet nods of acknowledgement, as if saying, "We see you now." And that recognition mattered because it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every woman watching, every silent soul wondering if she too could break free. He tried, of course, to pull me back into silence. He threatened, manipulated, and mocked. He told me I'd regret speaking out, that no one would stand with me. But each attempt to cage me only proved how afraid he was of my voice. He had built his power on my silence, and now that I had shattered it, he was left scrambling. My children became my greatest motivation. I saw how their eyes followed me differently. Now how my daughter sat a little taller. How my son's questions grew bolder. They were watching me not as a broken mother, but as a warrior who refused to bow. I realized that by choosing myself, I was also giving them permission to choose themselves one day. To never confuse loyalty with self-erasure. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror again. But this time, I didn't see hollow eyes. I saw a woman with fire. My reflection carried not defeat, but defiance. I whispered to myself, "You are unstoppable." And for the first time, I believed it. You've ever felt like your silence was suffocating you? Let this be your reminder. You are stronger than the cage they put you in. Your voice is your weapon. Your truth is your armor. And once you decide to rise, nothing can chain you again. Stay with me, 'cause this story doesn't end here. The next chapter will show how the unstoppable woman not only rebuilt her life but turned her scars into strength that inspired others. And now I ask you, when was the moment you stopped being silent and finally claimed your voice? Share it in the comments because your story might be the key that unlocks someone else's courage. There are moments in life when silence feels like the safest option, when keeping the peace seems more important than protecting your own soul. I thought staying quiet would shield my children, that swallowing my pain was a form of love. But silence only fed the lie, and the lie nearly devoured me whole. It wasn't until I broke the silence that I realized something profound. My voice was never just mine. It was a legacy for my children, a torch for anyone walking in the same darkness, proof that survival can lead to rebirth. Faith became my anchor. I learned that faith isn't about pretending life is perfect. It's about believing that even broken pieces can be rearranged into something beautiful. Every scar I carried turned into a reminder that I had endured, that I had stood when I thought I would collapse, that I had walked through fire and still emerged standing. What once felt like destruction revealed itself as transformation. I stopped measuring my worth by the man who betrayed me and started measuring it by the resilience that rose inside me. I stopped asking, "Why me?" and started asking, "What now?" That shift changed everything. It was no longer about what was taken from me, but about what I could build with what remained. And what remained was strength, dignity, and the undeniable truth that no one could erase me without my permission. The children I once thought I was protecting with silence now protect me with pride. They look at me not as the broken woman who endured betrayal, but as the mother who refused to disappear. My daughter walks taller because she saw me rise. My son speaks louder because he saw me claim my voice. That is the power of transformation. It ripples through generations. Inspiration doesn't come from perfect stories. It comes from the raw ones, the jagged edges, the parts that make us tremble before they make us strong. And if my story proves anything, it's this: you are stronger than the silence, stronger than the betrayal, stronger than the weight of what tried to destroy you. You don't have to wait for permission to rise. You are enough, right now, as you are. Healing is not forgetting, it is remembering without chains. Forgiveness is not about excusing, it is about freeing yourself from carrying what was never yours to bear. And strength is not the absence of fear, is moving forward in spite of it. Every day I choose to live not as a woman who was betrayed, but as a woman who was reborn. And that is what I want you to carry with you. Your story is not over. No matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how heavy the silence, no matter how broken you feel, there is always a next chapter waiting to be written. You hold the pen. You decide what comes next. If this story touched you, if you felt even for a moment that it mirrored your own life, then I invite you to take this step with me. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this story. Not because numbers matter, but because every time a story is shared, someone else might find the courage to rise too. And don't go far, because in the next video, we will step into another story of betrayal and redemption. One that will challenge everything you thought you knew about love, loyalty, and resilience. You won't want to miss it. Sometimes the stories we hear are not just Entertainment, they are warnings, lifelines, and roadmaps for survival. So stay with me. The journey doesn't end here. The next story might be the one that helps you finally see your own reflection in a new light.